This is the Blooming Psyche podcast. Grab a seat and join us as we navigate life our own way.
Now let's begin blooming our psyche.
Just a little conversation based around thoughts that we've come up with through our day-to-day lives, whether it be sitting outside in a lovely gazebo or thoughts while at work, sitting around, or just while living life, you know? So let's start with yours, Aries. See what do you got there?
Sure. Pondering the universe. All right. Random page, flip, stop. Here we go. So this is thought here. Tenacity with underlying conviction is the kickstart to facilitate your mental freedom. Don't let anybody take away who and what you strive to become.
Interesting. I like that. So, explain your thought process behind when you created this thought. Like, what's the encompassing thing that this turns into when you really delve into the mind of Aries in your thought making process?
Okay, so I would say most of the time it's me sitting and just thinking, trying not to think of anything in particular, and then once I kind of clear my mind, I start and focus on what am I doing? How am I doing it? And then go into just asking myself simple but open-ended questions in the way that I can explore that, right? And then I'll just start writing whatever I'm thinking in a way that it's summarized, right? So it gives you the ability to want to think in a different way about it because you're taking different parts that are separate. Let's say it's about solving something with joy, right? Like you're joyful about something. And by asking yourself different questions, it gives you the ability to explore different angles of it. And then when something culminates as that makes sense, right? Then you write that down because you're solving a specific problem to some kind of obstacle. Right? Because if that thought is represented by a problem, right, and this is a response or rather a answer to the question, then now you're going to have the solution, right? That you can now make a strategy to attain, right? Because all these don't mean anything unless you put in action and movement and make yourself do something that is the solution.
Right, but looking at the actual thought itself in regards to tenacity and all that jazz.
So this one in particular, I would say, I'll just read it again. So tenacity with underlying conviction is the kickstart to facilitate your mental freedom. So if I were to break that down, I'll say tenacity with underlying conviction, right? Like what comes to your mind when you say that, right? Tenacity is in like the more aggressive and direct approach, motivation, inner or exterior for whatever period of time, right? But you're tenacious about it. And then that with conviction, right? Like you are resolved upon getting to the solution of this thing.
Yeah.
And then is the kickstart to facilitate your mental freedom, right? Which is if you're in a rut, if you're in a slower, lower place where you don't feel or want to do many things, you have to generate the antithesis of that thing to compensate for where you are.
Yeah. So, and with tenacity and conviction being at like probably the biggest piece in that thought, I would say that is a fantastic starting point for anything to become accomplished, right? Because if you don't start off with the direct approach of attempting to achieve something and you don't have the conviction to go through it and follow through with that thing, and to follow through with the tenacity in which you're putting into this thing, then you're not going to be able to find that mental freedom in regards to being able to go out and accomplish any specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to give yourself that flexibility to be able to say, okay, maybe there's this one thing that I wanted to achieve and I couldn't do it in the first 2 tries, 3 tries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I'm going to give up. That just shows yourself that you don't have conviction. You might have had the tenacity to directly attack that thing.
Yeah, maybe once or twice or something.
Once or twice, right? But tenacity fades really quick if you don't back it with conviction.
Yeah.
Right? Conviction is all about, okay, maybe I couldn't take this direct approach, but what's a different kind of tenacious approach I could take to get to this from another angle, right? Because direct isn't the only way to accomplish something, right? But that said, maybe we can jump into my thought here, because
Sure.
I think it kind of, not quite fully bounces off of that, but we can go into it and see if that kind of reflects what you said there.
Sure.
And my thought that I've chosen is catching yourself stepping out of line a habit is all you need to make what you wish to become a constant.
Well, yeah, because you're generating something new,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the thing is what is it replacing?
Mm-hmm.
If you have time that's already allocated.
Absolutely.
If you don't have free time.
Right? So when I think of the tenacity and the backed by conviction, if you don't continue to make those things your habitual, just baseline state,
Mm-hmm.
then of course you're not going to be able to upkeep these things all the time, right? So whenever you find yourself thinking, I can't do this, I'm going to give up, I'm going to do something else, you need to be like, draw a hard line. There's got to be a couple words that you think when you decide you're not going to do something anymore, right? Because most people don't just turn their brain off and stop doing something, right? Most of the time they think, oh, this is too hard. Oh, this is something that I personally can't do for whatever reason, right? And then if you take key words out of these negative statements that you come up with in your brain that gives you a reason to stop doing something, and you draw a hard line on those thought processes, and then
Protection mechanism.
yeah, if you draw a hard line and be like, no, this is not what I should be thinking, and you continue to do that, and you become tenacious about that and consistent about that, then you're going to build a habit of not giving up.
Yeah.
Because you're stopping yourself from using these degrading words that are gonna push you away from the things that you want to accomplish.
Yeah, the interruption process.
Exactly, right? So you want to become tenacious, you want to have that consistency, you want to go after these things, but you also need to realize whenever your brain is going into default mode, which is usually for the average person going to be, this isn't something for me, this isn't what I can do, I can't accomplish this, I'm not worthy of this, maybe, right? There's a lot of different thought processes, and you kind of have to find the ones that are yours, that are negative, that you need to stop and put a hard line in front of and be like, nah, that's not me anymore. I'm going to continue going forward and push through this barrier that has been put up in front of me by myself.
Yeah.
So I think those two thoughts kind of coincide.
Totally. And I would almost join it together with the D&D reference.
Oh, please do tell.
Piggybacking off the last thing you just said, I would say that those differences that you apply that are negative and positive represent your attributes, right? And if you were to make some kind of character reference, it would be like your stat points and your skills.
Right.
But the thing is there are hard skills in the things that you've learned from experience, right? Or the things that are innate, right? Those are two very separate things.
Right.
But at the same time, you can be better at certain things if you allow yourself to be, just by letting go a little bit.
Right.
Rather than believing yourself incapable, even if you've never done it before, or you just see it and think you don't want to or can't do that thing.
Right.
Right. And then that is reflected as well. So if you have a character sheet, these are now like flaws and character different pieces that you can see.
Yeah.
But the thing is these are all malleable in this kind of person that we are, with the way that we can think.
Totally.
Because we can explore different things and change our thought process on what we've already experienced. And that is the kind of mechanism for changing yourself.
Right.
So if you don't believe in that mechanism, then how can you change what you want to change? So if you allow yourself to feel and open in that way to any particular part about yourself, there's some things that you may think yourself closed off to, as in, I'm not going to change this part of my identity. That could be a good one. Like it could be a good attribute that you're trying to preserve.
Absolutely.
Or elucidating a poor attribute that you're trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
And everything takes time, right? In the world that we live, other than like even our minds still, it just fluctuates a bit different. So if you're trying to attain something, when you're trying to get rid of it, how do you do that? Right? You have to change your patterns. What's in your patterns? Patterns are coupled by time and action. And then mind. Mind is the medium.
Yeah.
Because that's the one that's receiving the thought to do a thing. Or allowing and letting go of your authority to let autopilot take its more energy preserved actions, which could be detrimental. Right? And depending on what you decide to observe, which is the awareness, then I can see different parts of what I'm doing and then decide what I'm going to do instead.
Right.
But now there's a time void. So you need to generate a new set of habits.
Right. So how about you go through a quick example of something that you have used this process to change?
Sure.
Maybe even subconsciously.
Totally. Let's just do simple thing like cleaning. Right? So let's do sweeping. Okay? So sweeping. Let's say I'm going to do this every single day once. Simple. Just one time. So what is a habit? It is kind of 3 parts.
And here, let me give
just real quick. So you have, the trigger, which is the thing that is beckoning you to do this thing, the thought, or the thing that's arising the thought. Is it my floor being dirty? What is it? Right? Something's triggering me sweeping. The second thing is the routine. The routine is the thing that I am doing.
Right.
Am I doing a thorough job? Am I doing a poor job? That's all within the routine. Right? And the strategy and the things that I'm doing to attain completion.
Right.
Right? I do steps 0 to whatever, completed my routine, now I have a reward. The thing is the reward can be also during the routine, but it could also be limited to just after. If it's like monetary or something like that, that's a post reward.
Right.
But the during reward is maybe the anticipation. Right? Or the learning during.
Right.
Upon getting to that thing. Right? So you can see, what am I flavoring my actions by? And did I even pay attention to the actions that I do have currently? As in, what is the reward that I'm giving myself when I'm doing something that's making it so my body wants to preserve it, whether it's good or bad? Because it could be a good reward on a bad thing.
Yeah, that's totally. And that's, I think that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
Is to have a good reward on a bad thing. And then, so for example, you go through the day and you say you're going to go for a run, but then instead of going for a run, you go like a Dairy Queen, and then you go home and you do nothing.
Yeah, but you were satisfied by filling the void that you felt by the ice cream.
Yeah.
Which was like the dopamine, the happiness, whatever, from just the absolute deliciousness that is ice cream.
Yes.
Right? As opposed to doing something that's more meaningful, that's going to drive your actual core like desire to complete something because it's for you.
Right.
Like not for you as in like a kind of just like pleasure thing, but like for you as in I can feel like I'm stepping forward kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And that's completely separate from anything else other than stepping forward.
Right.
It's a very unique sensation. And when you know that you've set out something to do that is stepping forward and you complete that thing, you give your own mind authority.
Right.
Because you believe in your own word. So
Absolutely.
the more things that you do that you say that you don't do, right? Like let's say I'm going to sweep once a day and I don't do that. Well, that word loses power.
Right.
So you must give yourself that reward. And then it's difficult at first, but as you obtain that reward, now you have the snowball, right?
Right.
And you're starting at the bottom of this hill now. So eventually you climb up this hill. Let's say I'm going to quantify it in like 100. So I'm just going to say 100 steps on this hill. And the first, like, let's say 25% is really hard because you have no momentum. You can't even see where you are. You just look up and you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
right?
Big
but
old
when you
fuck.
when you get partway up this hill and you can see and look down at what you've done, well, now you're like, fuck, dude, I've actually done something. I'm getting up this hill and I've been consistent with it, and I can feel that motivation that's now interior, that's not external.
Absolutely.
Right? And that powers my action.
Yeah, but you have to be very diligent
You have
and
to be aware of it.
careful, because
Yeah.
when you look down that hill, it's really easy to drop that ball, right? And then that ball will go all the way back down if you quit.
Yeah, you're like, oh, all right, I've climbed enough.
Do you think
this is good?
Do you think a dung beetle stops pushing those shit balls up a hill? Probably not.
No.
If it drops
Probably
that
not.
thing, it goes back down the hill and gets it and starts pushing it again.
Well, yeah, because it's experienced it falling back down, and it's like, I can't let this happen again.
No, exactly.
So
it's
that's
detrimental.
Well, that's baked into its genetic material because it's lived so many lives in its generational past that the body remembers because it's offspring of its past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and that's where the interesting part is where people get in their own way.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to create something that is artificial
Right.
rather than something that resonates with what is nature.
Right.
Right? You're not following truth. You're trying to make up lies to make yourself feel better about certain things when in reality things are how they are. And you can ride the wave or you can keep crashing into it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's so easy to keep crashing, right? Like, but this is the thing is when you start riding the wave, when you're riding it and you suck at it for the first little while.
Yeah.
And you could take this literally. Start trying to surf, man. That shit's hard. It's not easy to surf, but once you get good at surfing, it's a breeze, right?
Yeah.
Same things with everything else.
Yeah.
If you pick something and you ride the wave and you jump on that and you're excited about it, you're gonna suck for the first while.
Oh yeah, 100%.
As long as you don't stop right away and you're like, I never want to surf again. Well, you're going to get better at riding the wave because you're going to learn. You're going to understand how the muscles work. It's less about how good you are at the moment and more about how, like, your legs haven't formed the muscle memory to be able to do the thing.
Yeah.
To surf, as the example, right?
Yeah,
So,
knowing that it gets easier.
Exactly. So once your legs form that muscle memory in the process of surfing, then you're going to be like, oh, this is a lot easier than I thought. But it's not any easier. It's just that your legs have now become accustomed to that thing, that movement, that flow that you get into when you're surfing. So yeah, that's a hugely important thing is not quitting too early. If you're gonna do something, you might as well just follow through with it for whatever amount of time. If you say, I want to learn to box, and I want to box for 6 months, and I'm not going to stop boxing until that 6-month period is up. And by the end of that 6-month period, I want to look the part effectively, right? And you go consistently every day. Well, if you go 1 week and you're like dripping sweat and you just feel like shit every time you leave and then you immediately quit, well, you're not going to get any better at boxing, and you just showed yourself that you're probably not going to get very much better at anything because you're just putting in a week, even though you promised yourself with your own word that you're going to do 6 months, right? Yeah. So how are you ever going to trust yourself to be able to accomplish something and move forward in life if you're only giving yourself a week when you said 6 months?
Yeah, trust is huge. Right?
It is.
And the only person that you really can trust in is yourself.
Absolutely.
And if you can't trust yourself, well, then you're kind of fucked.
You are very fucked.
And then I'll bring this back to the snowball reference I was making with the hill and the 100 points, which is once you start to get kind of past that kind of barrier where you feel a lot of resistance.
Yep.
Right? For pretty much everything that you're doing because it's your mind is changing and you can feel that sensation and you're not sure what it is and you feel it as discomfort or you've given it some kind of context that's detrimental to your progress because that mental feeling of change and resistance is always there. It's imminent. It's going to happen when you feel change. So if you're always fearful or running from that sensation and you're giving it a negative descriptor, well, then you're not giving it a positive reward. So whenever you feel that thing and you're like, yeah, I'm getting better. No, you're giving yourself a negative connotation on getting better. Because change is that sensation where you're feeling that mental resistance.
Right.
You're exploring new domains, right? You're exploring new territory, which it feels a little harder. like the perpetuity of your habit, like continuing consistently and committing to your own mind and letting yourself know that you're doing it and do it. Right? Once you get to that 50% mark, it snowballs because now you're doing it more than you're not.
Right.
Right? So your body almost has no choice but to continue because it becomes part of your autopilot.
Yeah.
Right? It's happening more than it isn't.
Absolutely.
And then you forget about the things that are happening more than they aren't because they get left in the background. And how many things fell into this category that were good and how many fell into the category that were bad and that got out of your awareness because it's happening beyond your control because you're not the one pulling the strings when you're on autopilot. What you've programmed in yourself is what's happening.
Right.
Just based on your actions and what is the least resistance because you've already traveled through those unknowns on this thing.
Yes.
So when you try to travel out of them, well, now you've got something that's happening more often than isn't, which is your bad habit that you're trying to replace. So when you're trying to create a new habit, it's going up against this behemoth of a habit already because it's already so ingrained.
Yeah.
So that's you're facing now more mental resistance because you already have something established. So if you're also not prepared for this mental resistance, well, now you're never going to beat that behemoth of overcoming that habit that was previously there.
Right. Totally.
Right?
Yeah. That's and that's it's an interesting take too, because how do you go about approaching something that you may not even think of as this mental issue that you're having, right? You might not even see something that you're doing as a problem.
Exactly, and that is the problem.
Yeah,
because you don't see it as a problem.
Yeah, it's like
so
an
you defend it.
behemoth.
You're like, oh my god. Well, you can see someone, and you see this in people all the time. Like, why is this person defending this shitty thing that they keep doing? But they can't. They don't see it as shitty because they see it as the way that they see it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, for example, you going to somebody's house and this is a little bit of a different piece to what we were talking about, but this is the example that came to my head, is when people get frustrated by people who swear in their house, right?
Oh.
I know it's a little bit of a left turn, right? But like people who get frustrated by that, just words, simply, right? People who see it as vulgar and stuff like that, and they just can't seem to get over the fact that maybe this person was raised in this way and that they just, that's just how they are and what the things that they've said because that's what they've been raised around and they've always talked like that or whatever, right?
Well, yeah, that's one step further than what is initial, right? And what's initial is their perspective.
Right.
So if their perspective on swear words is bad, like they don't like having it happen to themselves, like them saying swear words.
Yeah.
Like if they are against themselves in their own mind about this thing, when they see it, they're trying to diminish it in the same way that they're diminishing it in their own head. So that when they see someone doing it, they want to make them stop.
Right. Yeah.
Because they don't want them to have this thing that they don't like, and for whatever reason that they've given in their own head as to why.
Right.
Let's say they don't want you to, I don't know, fucking swear exactly just like right now, because when they swear in their own head, it's because whenever that happened, they got hit or something. Right? So they don't want someone else to get hit because that's what happens when people swear.
Right. Or, well, I mean, and it could just be a lot
but just in like a more of like a trauma.
Sure. Yeah. That's a trauma response. Sure. But in more of a simple term, they just don't like the word. Or they don't like people who swear in general because they think it's vulgar or whatever, right?
Well, yeah,
but there's so many things and so many different experiences in life that people don't really think about, right? They think that everybody should be up to their standard, right? And everybody needs to realize, I think, that everybody has their own experience from the day that they're born to the moment that they are right now, right? Which made up the thing that they are. So if you hear somebody who's like, fuck,
there's a whole history to that.
There's a whole history to that. And whether that is trauma, right?
Yeah.
That could have been the complete opposite spectrum from somebody else who was traumatized and decided never to swear again because their parents beat them with a fucking belt, right? It could have been that this person's parents beat them with a belt 100 times a day when they would do anything even slightly wrong. And that dad of that person or that mom of that person that was beating them with the belt would swear consistently. Now their coping mechanism is swearing, right?
Yeah, because it's a rebellion.
Exactly. It's a rebellion, right? So like everybody has this different experience that will encompass what they are now, and people just need to understand and be like, maybe you can ask and be like, hey man, I'm not a big fan of these words. Could you maybe not say them as much, especially if somebody's, you know, being vulgar and just fuck shit,
Yeah.
like every other word. That's
Well, they're gonna naturally ask why.
yeah,
And what
totally.
would your response be?
Yeah, and well, I guess
Well, you have to give some explanation as to why it irks you, right? Like, what are the pros and
yeah,
cons?
absolutely. Yeah, I thought you were coming from the perspective of, or asking from the
No.
perspective of the person who was
No.
swearing a lot.
But
Response,
if you're the person trying to...
so let's just say I'm
Yeah.
the person that is offended by these words, I suppose is the right word.
Yeah, sure.
It would be tough because I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
I'm in the same boat.
yeah, but if I was to be offended by something, and I cannot think of any words that I'm actually offended by or that I would not want to hear. But if I was to come up with an answer to that question of why do you not want me to say these words?
Yeah.
It would be something like, depends on the people that we're around. If there's kids around,
Okay.
there should be an obvious, just like, hey, can we just bring that down a little bit because we have children present that, you know, and we don't swear around them a lot. It's just kind of a respect thing, right?
Sure.
But out of respect of the people in this room right now that aren't really interested in hearing those or saying those words consistently, could we maybe just tone it down a little bit? Like, I don't mind if it's every once in a while. I don't know, right? Like, but for me personally, outside of that question, it doesn't matter. I don't care.
Okay.
If it takes away from the conversation itself, and there's just a fuck and a shit thrown in there for no reason, right? And it's not actually
It has to be tasteful.
to the it's not adding to the conversation in any way, and it's just essentially blabbage to fill silence.
Yeah.
And that's what it's being used for. Well, then, yeah, I could see how that would get
Blabbage.
annoying pretty quick. Blabbage to fill the silence,
Yeah.
right? Then that's pointless. It's pointless word use. Instead of just being able to stop for a second, think about the next thing that you're going to say, you add in a fuck or a shit, right? It's just...
Well, think about where that rooted from, because that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about this, which is you talked about like preserving that from kids, right? So let's say you were in one of those households that was very heavy on preserving the absence of these swear words around these kids.
Yeah.
And then as the kid, you grow up as to think that this is the enemy. How dare they say these words? You're not supposed to say these words. You can't say these words around me.
Right.
You're not allowed.
Yeah.
And then now they have this superiority train of trying to stop people from saying them. I don't know. I haven't really run into many people who do this, but hypothetically, I could see this in many situations of thought.
Yeah.
Right? Where someone doesn't want someone to say anything in whatever specific context that it is. They're just trying to shut it down. Right? And they give themselves the authority on this topic for whatever thing that they feel like they know, and however they feel like in their perspective, this is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
My logic is infallible. Argue about it with me. And then that's what they do, and everything's a fucking argument, and no one wants to talk to you because you're a problem.
Yeah.
You just want to make problems about everything, and everyone else just wants to have fun and be happy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's interesting, right? Because like, how did you get there? How did you get to the point where you're so polar about this topic? Is it the importance and value and the ethics of whatever it is that it stands for, and you're all about it and you want to defend it? Right? Or is it this was just something that I feel is me? Like, I identify with this thing, so I feel like you're attacking me when you talk about it. Right?
So,
and then whenever someone says anything about it, you now you're on the defensive. Your mood has already changed. Your chemical cocktail, the way that you're perceiving thoughts has shifted. Now I have to change my rationale and change how I speak, so now I can deflate your heightened state. Because I don't want it to go there, because it was a miscommunication.
Right. Totally. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
neither person wants to be angry about this thing. They just want to have a conversation. And if that's left out, if that's missed, the intent of the person, well, now you don't have the capacity to calm down because you couldn't read the situation.
Right. For sure.
And most people are joking.
Yeah, absolutely. But like keeping on that one track and that train of thought with people that are get upset about other people who swear, right? A lot. I could see how that could derail a conversation at the same time, especially when you're talking about people that are 40 plus, you know?
Okay.
That's not something that was usually seen as a good thing in a regular community.
Being older?
In which no. Like swearing a lot.
Yeah.
Being 40 plus years ago, that's not something that was seen as something as a sign of like non-intelligence and
just everything was very strict.
Yeah, essentially just being a punk, right?
Yeah.
So I could understand from their perspective and their different views being raised in that way, why they would see that as a problem, right? Especially when raising young children and stuff like that, and them wanting to grow up being respectable and not swearing all the time and blah blah blah. It's fair, right? But I also think that there's a healthy middle ground where, when especially in regards to children, you shouldn't be afraid to say the words around them, because if they understand the meaning of the word and they learn the proper usage of the word, and they're not just throwing it around willy-nilly at random people saying fuck you for no reason, right? Then it's just a word.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel like that's with every single type of censorship. Totally. Because it generates rebellion. Right? And if you try to preserve this thing that is being used in the appropriate context for no reason, because you just don't want it to happen, well, then now you're generating a different attachment to this word, and it means what it isn't supposed to mean. Right? Because they have a tainted view on it. Interesting.
Yeah. So let's think of an example of that. What's an example you could come up with for something completely different that would be
let's say like a silver or like a golden silver spoon, like childhood, right? It taints the way it flavors your mind in a specific orientation, right? Because of the way that you were raised, right? But so many different ways that you can be raised that'll flavor your like biases, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking in that regard, right? When you're raised with a golden spoon and everybody is trying to be perfect around you, right, and raise you to be perfect, you will never reach that standard, but you're always going to strive for it, right? You're always going to want to hit it, even though you'll never actually hit it, and that's going to piss you off to no end, right? Because everybody around you raised you to be this perfect little person, right? But then here you are trying to get through life, trying to be perfect for everybody else that raised you to be perfect, but you're never going to find that ever, right? So you're actually damaging kids more.
Well, yeah, it's a bunch of unmet expectations.
Totally. And then that there's the rebellious stage. So when when kids are really young, there's no point in hiding things from them because they're inevitably going to find them, right? It's just through unless you homeschool them, right? Their entire lives, which I think is just a terrible idea. I don't like the idea. Like, I don't particularly enjoy homeschooling. I understand why people do it, and I can respect it if you have the time to do it. But I just don't think it's a great idea because your kids are no longer socializing properly with other people as consistently, right?
There are groups, in community.
Exactly. There are other groups. There are groups that you can get involved with that have these homeschooled kids come together, and then they learn together sometimes, and they go out on outings and all that stuff. That's cool.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to raise your kid with a golden spoon in his mouth all the time, this kid is going to find these things that go against what you, as a parent, would deem to be a golden spoon. They're going to find it, and then they're going to go through the rebellion stage, and then they're going to be doing those things left, right, and center because they know that that's something that they're not supposed to do, and now they're old enough to be able to do it. Right? So, for example, this is probably why a lot of young kids that come from wealthy neighborhoods will start smoking pot and swearing constantly and hanging out with friends, going out late at night, not coming home, not giving a shit about what people think, right? Because their entire lives, it's been so strict and so regimented that you are to be home at this time and you are to do this and you are to do this. Well, now this kid's old enough once you hit 15, there's a primal instinct that is to have the child move away from the family.
Yeah.
Right? To excavate or not excavate, extract themselves from the homestead, right? From the family.
Yeah, they need change. They
need
a catalyst
change.
of action.
And that's why you see parents and kids arguing all the time at around that age, 14, 15, 16 till you're like in your 20s sometimes, until you move out, right? It's a natural instinct to get away from that and to change who you are, because what you were before isn't who you really think you are, right? A lot of the time these kids want, and I felt this myself, right? I had a very specific way of being raised. But once I hit a certain age, I was like, well, I don't have to do that. This isn't who I am.
Yeah, that's for kids.
I haven't thought this, right? I haven't these aren't my thoughts, these are their thoughts.
Yeah.
So what is my thoughts? And then you go through those thoughts and you try to figure out what it is that makes you.
Yeah.
Right? And then that's when you start having failed. Like you start to fail as a kid and you start to make mistakes and you start to go out and get in shit from your parents and do all this stuff. Sometimes it comes from the parents being too pushy and too regimented and too strict on their kids. Sometimes you just got to give them the freedom to fuck up when they're young so that they can understand and see what the negative benefits are or the negative consequences are of doing these specific things and saying these specific things to certain people and everything like that, right? But then also come at it with a good, strong approach to remedy the situation for them and teach them from that experience, right? Because if you just say, "Oh, you fucked up. You shouldn't have sworn at the clerk or whatever. You shouldn't have sworn at the person at the grocery store. That was stupid." Well, they're not going to learn anything from that. Instead, you make them apologize. You do this, you do that, and then you go home and you sit them down and be like, "What was your thought process there? Can we figure out why that was maybe not a good idea? Can you tell me why that was maybe not a good idea? The guy at the store was, way bigger than me. I couldn't have done anything about it. So why the heck are you swearing at this guy? Was I swearing at this guy? No. You don't do that to random people. That's just not something that's acceptable, right?"
Yeah.
And then hopefully the child will understand and learn from that, right? But everybody's experience is different, as we were talking about earlier. So it really comes down to the personal experience. So anyways, I just rambled.
Well, no, that makes sense. Well, because those things are what generate the personal experience, the trials and tribulations as a young person, right? Because you're so heightened to what you absorb and what you feel and how you feel it, and where you have no foundation yet, so you're just absorbing things, right? Which is a critical phase where you need to fuck up, and when you're always beaten on this very specific path that has been architected for you for greatness. Sure, it may be successful, but in the likes that it isn't, which may be high, you now are losing the ability to be creative and explore and find the different ways that things are better or worse, rather than just being told this is how you have to do it, right? Because you're not being able to explore the different variabilities around it. Because you're not personally experiencing it. You're just having to do this one thing that you have to do. Yeah. Right?
Totally.
Which, when you choose them for yourself, when you found the specific thing that works correctly, then you can make this very direct, specific approach to discipline around being regimented.
Right.
But if you haven't gotten to the point where you can believe it yourself, well, then it's folly.
Right.
Right? That's where school fails. Because it fucking throat bashes all this information for your entire childhood where you don't want any of it. Yeah. Because you are still deliberating the previous shit because you haven't been able to explore any of it. Yeah. Unless you've taken the time outside of school. But likely you're just going to want to do something to compensate for you being berated for 7-8 hours a day.
So let me ask a question. Do you think that school systems would benefit from starting kids in school later? Like 10 instead of 5, like 5 years later. Let the kids go through the experience of understanding the world around them.
I don't think it's that it being at specific time is a problem. I think it's like, obviously the different ages have different methods of teaching, right? Which they explore and they do different things. And that's awesome. But some places do that poorly, which is kind of what I'm getting at. I'm not trying to make a global kind of generalization of something, because everything has their own specificities to their own conditions where they are. But yeah, back to your point.
Wow, I was just. It's honestly not a big point, so we can just move on to something else.
Sure. Let's pick another thought, because that was a really good.
Yeah, I'll start with mine. I'll go with mine first, and then you can do yours.
Yeah.
This was my
Right ahead.
thought that was kind of based on restoring to your principles, right? And a lot of
Okay.
people don't have basic principles.
Sure.
Right? They have basic principles that are subconscious that they don't think about as a basic principle, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, the thought is restore yourself to your basic principles on every breath. If your path is like a bonsai tree, your principles are the tools you use to trim it, and your breath is the reminder to look. And then my principles are, I am what I choose to be. I'm a man of action. I'm happy. I'm here to make change. Nothing but me will stop me. And I'm a calculated and curious individual. So every time I take a breath and I'm conscious of that breath, I go back to these principles and I try to remind myself of all of these things that will encompass me.
Yeah.
Right? And that's very different from what I see in a lot of people. If you were to go up to some random person and say, hey, what are your basic principles? They'd be like, what the fuck is that?
Like your personal valued affirmations.
Yeah, exactly. Essentially, those are my affirmations that are reminded to me on my breath, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is to trim the bonsai tree called your mind into those things, and by reminding yourself to do it.
Yep.
Right? So you have your things. Pick 5, right?
Sure.
Just write down 5 different ones. Those are your basic principles. And then every time you take a breath and you're conscious of it and you remember, you can start by just going back to that page and looking to remind yourself. Or if you remember them, you can just remember them and think those in your head. I am happy. That's the biggest one. I am happy. That's number 1 for me. I put it down at number 3, but that's the biggest one.
There are many words to be like a thesaurus for happy, right? Like as a synonym. Let's say it's joyful, right? Because I would say joyful is better than happy. Because happy is the result, whereas in joyful is the journey. Like you're more experiencing something and it's generating happiness.
Sure.
Whereas
Yeah.
happiness is more of like, if you're always aiming for happiness, that can lead you into like a very consuming life.
Right. So, and when I think of happiness, I don't think of it in that perspective.
Yeah, but that's why I'm making the clarification.
Sure. Yeah. But when I think of happy, I think of being happy with what you have, right?
Okay.
I am happy with the fact that I'm alive.
Yeah.
That I get to experience what I'm
Gratitude.
experiencing, right? So sure, I am gracious. Sure, that could be another one. But for me, happy works best because I am effectively happy that I am alive, that I'm here, that I'm experiencing the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations and the shitty days, right?
Yeah.
Just because happy is a result of something, that's exactly why I am happy. The result of me being alive is what makes me happy, right? So I didn't use the word joyful. I didn't think that deep into it because simply I am happy. That's all that is. That's why I put it down that way.
I am that I am.
Yes, exactly. I am that I am. Exactly. So that I'm going to keep it like that because I like that. But yes, joyful might be a better word use for some other people,
Sure.
right? It really comes down to, and these things don't even have to be things that you are now, right? These are things that I'm making my basic principles because that is what I am choosing to make my basic principles,
Okay.
right? I am what I choose to be is the top because everything else on this list
Well, that enables
results
you.
to that.
That's like the enabling cheat
Or
code
is a
option.
result of that. Yeah, exactly. I am what I choose to be. So I am a man of action. I am happy. I am here to make change. Nothing but me will stop me. I am calculated and curious, right? Those are all things because I'm choosing to be those things.
Yes.
Starting with that is very strong.
Yeah.
And then being able to read that
It's a
first.
must.
Exactly. It makes everything a must.
No, that's a must. Like
Oh,
you have to enable
totally.
yourself the ability to change.
Absolutely. And
Because-
I also want to get a bonsai tree now. I've been thinking about it. I want to get
Sure.
one just to trim it and to
make it like a milestone.
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
reference of time,
totally.
right?
Yeah, it'd be perfect.
Something that
and
you
then
can see that reminds you of when you begun something.
Yeah,
so you
and
don't
then
forget
shape
the existence of it.
shape the thing, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
All right, let's transition to my thought.
Absolutely.
Flip. Random page. Let's do place yourself into the seat of awareness when now exceeds momentary and sustained connection to frivolous activities. And I'll read it one more time. Place yourself into the seat of awareness when now exceeds momentary and sustained connection to frivolous activities.
Frivolous activities are always connected to the now.
Totally.
Which is interesting.
They absorb
They
your
do.
moment.
They do absorb the moment for sure.
right? And then specifically frivolous activities in the way that it's something that's not necessary.
Yeah, most of the time it's just sucking you in and holding you there,
Yeah.
right? You're not actually and you're not even aware of it, right? I can guarantee you that if you went through and started watching YouTube shorts,
Yeah.
like I have a habit of doing, which is not good, but I love YouTube shorts.
Depends if they're good or not.
Yeah, exactly. But if you go through and you start watching these things, it's going to give you a wide array of different things,
Sure.
different information and different knowledge, all in a very short period of time, 10 to 15 seconds per short, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're essentially refreshing your brain's refresh rate every 15 seconds, trying to acquire this new knowledge, just completely unaware of the knowledge you're actually gaining, right? So you're not linking it to anything in your head, and you're just scrolling to the next thing, and now you're 2 shorts later and you forgot the one that you watched 2 shorts ago, right?
Well, it wasn't important
Unless
in
it
the
made
first
you
place.
laugh, right? If it's a funny one or
Yeah.
it was a really cool thing that was like scientific, like, oh, we've discovered a planet that has aliens on it
Yeah.
or some shit,
It
right?
also depends if you take the time to really think about it,
Yeah, totally.
right? Because if it's something that's relevant to your goals or to your aspirations, your affirmations, your values, or whatever it is, if it's relevant to you, that thing is valuable. But it's only valuable if you take the time to consolidate it and integrate and ask questions about it when you're thinking and looking at it, right? Or it's not, like you said, making connections to your long-term memory, right? It's not adding itself to the accumulation of information to then get sorted by yourself later or in the moment, right? It's not joining the conversation. It's just part of the conversation on the side. And since it's not part of the whole, it then gets lost because it hasn't made the connections.
Right.
Unless somehow through very specific targeting of your just thinking about something, you try to specifically target that piece of information. Then maybe you can recall it. But if it hasn't made its way as part of your mind, well, then it's in your short term. And that just gets flushed and rewritten.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. And so with what you were saying in your thought there, being aware and sitting in the seat of awareness, that is a hugely important step in just moving anywhere in life. Being aware and knowing what you're experiencing around you at all given moments, right? Because even if you are watching, like these programs are built to suck you in and make you unaware of what's happening around you, because it wants your full attention. It doesn't want you to have attention on anything else.
Well, that's its resource
Because
that it's collecting from you.
Well, that's how it gets money, right? Every single time you watch these things, you're giving them like 10 cents.
Why else is it free?
Exactly.
Because it's not free.
Exactly.
Your attention,
Your
is
time
what
is the
what they're paying
payment,
for.
right? Money is not real, right? The only thing that is an actual real valuable currency is your time, because your time goes away, and it goes away a lot faster than you think.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
And this
finite.
is something that I need to become aware of more, because I'm aware of it, but then I still look at 1 or 2, and then I'm like 25 in, and I'm like, fuck, I totally did that again. And it's just like, shit. So it's easy. It's really crazy and interesting how even with somebody who is aware of the negative effects of these things, I'm still so easily sucked in. Right. And you got to think about that with other people, right? How many people are doing this for 4 hours a day? They get home and they just watch YouTube shorts or YouTube videos or play video games all day. And it's just like, I'm aware of it and I still do it. It's just like, fuck, man. What do we do about this? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'll give you an answer to that question.
Yeah.
So basically, I think it comes down to interruption, right? Fundamentally, because there's a good way to interrupt something and there's a bad way to interrupt something. So let's give an example. So let's say I'm interrupting that gaming something that I was doing. Let's say I was doing for 10 hours a day, right? But when I say no or stop, like we got back to the habit scheme where we have the snowball in the hill, my word starts without power because this thing is very powerful in my habits in my day. Right. It's just like loss, and someone dies, you lose a void because they're never there anymore. And when you interact with them, that time is no longer there. It's impossible to reach it.
Right.
So you feel that void. But that has to get replaced by something else. So when you interrupt a bad activity, you have to give yourself something to fill it, which is the habit that fills it. But the interruption is also one of those habits. So as this is on the weaker end of things, and you lie to yourself when you say you're going to stop something and you don't, then your word and your truth goes down as well.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So when you build that word, which is your interruption now, you've gained another habit that benefits your word, or it can hurt your word. It's up to you. Right? But the more things you accumulate that can increase your word because you're doing something that you say you're going to do and you do it, which is stopping doing that thing in the moment. Let's say you just interrupted for 5 seconds, but at least you did.
Yeah.
Right? And if you give yourself a negative thought as like, oh my God, I can't believe I just interrupted that. Right? I'm going to go back and do that. Or you give yourself the positive thought of, yes, I actually stopped doing this thing. I caught myself at 5 minutes in of death scrolling. Rather than 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right? I caught myself at 5 minutes. Yes. And you give yourself like a positive motivation. Well, that is time stamped into your memory and gets imprinted. Right? So whatever connotation that your body is presently feeling in the moment that it's imprinted is captured the next time you feel that memory, because you do feel it. And if you felt shitty about whatever you were doing when you caught yourself death scrolling, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm death scrolling, but you still interrupted it. So you give a negative connotation to your interruption because you're mad that you were death scrolling rather than happy that you stopped.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Very, very subtle.
Yeah.
But it gets captured, and you're either doing one or you're doing the other.
And I can totally see how that would be where people would make the mistake, right? Because it's so easy to make that small, minute error in the way that you think. If you're thinking, yeah, that totally makes sense. You, instead of doing the, oh shit, I was death scrolling again, that totally makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, because you imprint that negative sadness, but you're still doing the thing.
For me, it's not, oh shit, I was death scrolling again. It's fuck. God damn it.
Yeah.
And then I just throw the phone. It's like, fuck.
Yeah.
Fuck.
But you get mad at doing it rather than get happy that you stopped.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's that. And I wish it wasn't that hard to see that, but now that it's in my face, it's in my face.
Yeah,
like,
you can't not see it.
Yeah. So just being like, oh, I caught myself. Perfect. Great. Let's move on to different things.
And that gains strength.
Totally.
And your word. Right?
And
even if you're not even doing anything in the moment, you're just stopping.
Yeah. Well, all of that reminds me of training a dog.
Sure.
Right? Because think about the word use that you use when you're trying to train your dog.
Sure.
Right? When they do something you don't want, no. You give them the angry sound.
Feel that.
They know, they're like, oh, I fucked. Negative connotation around that thing. I don't want to do that again. Or maybe they do it a couple times and you're like, no, bad dog, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, fuck, okay, I guess I'll stop doing that. I guess I'll stop pissing on the floor, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But then whenever they do something good, you give them the happy voice. You give them the, yes, yeah, good dog, yeah, woo. Yeah, you pet them, play with them, give them treats. They're like, holy fuck, dopamine, let's go.
Yeah.
And then they after you do that enough, they'll attach what you say to the thing that they should be doing.
Yeah.
Right. So like sitting, dog, you tell them to sit. After they've finally done it, they sit. You give them the treat. Say yes, good dog, whatever. And then after you've done that 100 times, now they understand what that word means. So then they sit and they don't even need a treat anymore. But then you can still you still want to give it to them every once in a while. So remember that they can get that reward and get that dopamine up. And then you can do that while moving on to different things. But if you start punishing behavior or give a negative thing to a behavior, such as, for example, our dog barking at a bear outside, and you go, no, and the dog's like, what the fuck? there's a random creature outside and you're telling me not to bark at it?
Yeah.
What is wrong with you? Like, and then if you keep doing that, they'll eventually stop barking at it.
Yeah.
Right? And then you won't know if there's a bear outside. So when the dog starts freaking out and going rah rah rah, like we'll say no when it barks at random things, right? Because we don't want it to just bark at random things. But when it barks at a bear, you know the bark from Cleo. She goes like, she has like a and then like, you'll just be like, oh, that's a bear, and look outside. Surely enough, there's a bear. And we'll always get super excited, like pet her and play and give her some treats and stuff and be like, yes, good girl, scaring off the bear. You know, so you can kind of do that with your own brain. You give it those positive things when you do the good things.
Exactly.
You train yourself like a dog, and you will fucking succeed at training yourself to do whatever it is that you want.
And this is the one problem, because most people allow themselves to be ignorant of the consequences of their actions. And that is absolutely the reason why they are where they are. Simply so, you are how you think, whether you want to believe it or not, right? You are the consequences of your patterns,
right?
Which manifests into your destiny, which is why you have control over that.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
To the degree that you have control over what it is that you do and the ripple effects of those actions.
Absolutely.
Obviously, there are things that are unchanging and changing that you don't have control over.
Yeah.
Right? But you can still travel on the surface of those things and make impact in yourself and around you.
Absolutely. So great example of that when it comes to what you have control over and don't have control over is, let's say somebody's visiting your house. Let's just say you and I are sitting here having this exact conversation.
Sure.
And I accidentally knock over your glass table that we're sitting at and it shatters on the ground, right? You have the choice. You don't have control over the fact that the table fell and shattered.
Yeah.
Right? Unless we caught it.
I probably would have laughed.
Sure, right? But that's your choice.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other people would immediately just get furled up with anger and be like, you broke my table. You owe me a new fucking table. And they're willing to destroy the relationship and the friendship over a fucking glass table. That probably cost, $200.
How dare you?
I got that from Home Depot 3 years ago. Right? But most people will react that way when you break something of theirs, unless they're trying to be kind and nice. Then they'll go and they'll be nice to you, and they go shit talk somebody else about, or shit talk to somebody else.
Dude fucking
They broke
my
fucking table, blah blah blah. And then
the other guy's like, what the hell? Can't believe you did that.
I can't believe they broke your table by accident.
No context.
And then and then they come up with all these theoretical things that they would have said if they'd thought about it at the time, and blah blah blah, and just like stupid shit, making themselves even more angry and worked up. And like, my favorite thing is I was at a friend's house, and I think I had broken something of theirs, kind of the same scenario as what we were just talking about. And they didn't say anything. They were kind. But then they went and had a conversation with a friend of theirs, and then they texted me angrily about the fucking thing that I broke. And I was just like, you weren't angry about it earlier. And then they're like,
they got convinced.
So they had a conversation with somebody else, got themselves all worked up, and then they came and responded to the fact that this thing broke 3 days ago, 3 days later, to talk to me about it angrily. And I'm just like, well, first of all, it's
bottled rage.
Yeah, and first of all, it's just a thing. I can pay for it if you'd like. It's not a big deal to me, right? So, do you want me to fix it? And they're like, no, right? Like, so. But on the flip of the coin, there, my friend Darian, who you've met, I was floating down Cowichan River on his mom's floaty.
I was there.
Oh yeah, that's right, you were there. Holy shit! We were floating down the thing and popped the bottom of it, and there was a big hole, and I ended up having to like kind of weirdly float in it until we got to the end and let them know, and they were like, it's not a big deal, right? Yeah. Nobody was upset.
At least you were attached.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's just all about how you choose to respond to things. You can allow yourself to be happy all of the time if you just be happy or joyful, as you were saying earlier. Like if you can just be joyful and not really care about material crap, because this isn't permanent. The only thing that's permanent is you until you're gone.
Exactly.
Right?
And we make our own impressions about things.
Absolutely.
We choose the impact that happens upon us based on what we feel equitable to the situation.
Totally.
Sometimes your truth is fucking pretty shit,
Yeah.
Right? Like your lens or however you're viewing it is really detrimental to yourself and people around you, and you're not able to see it because to you it's absolute.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And you haven't given yourself, like you've written at the top of your list there, the ability to change. Because you think you are who you are.
Choosing who you are going to be. Right?
And
I am who I choose to be. Right? So in that regard, if you are choosing to be what you are doing right now. So if you're a stuck up dude that's pissed off all the time and you're losing all your friends and you're not sure why, but then you just take a second here while listening and look inwards and be like, am I the fucking problem?
Sometimes you gotta look at yourself as the problem, because you might just be
the problem, right? And most of the time you probably are the problem if everyone's leaving you, right?
Yeah.
That's just
people
how that is.
Evacuate your vicinity.
Yeah, well, because most people can only deal with shit for so long. Most people can only deal with getting bullied and getting told that they're an asshole and whatever, and say like, just negative shit. And there's people that I can think of right now in my head that, and I'm sure you can think of, that have, acted in this way. And man, you just can't put yourself around that, right? So when you're the person in that scenario, you really need to have the ability to just stop and think like, what the fuck am I saying? These are other human beings and I'm treating them like garbage.
Yeah.
Like, what is that about? Do I want to keep these people around? Like, maybe. Yeah. Oh, I do want to keep these. Maybe I should start treating them with respect. But now at this point, if you've done this for the course of months or years,
you've lost merit.
Yeah, you've lost the merit. Now they're going to be like, you're being nice. What the fuck is this about?
Yeah,
like,
who
why
is
are you?
This guy?
What happened?
You've just been shitting on me this whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, did you just take a bunch of DMT or some shit and completely have a mind change? Like no. But you got to really take a second, and you got to catch yourself earlier than later. That's the best way to do it, right? Obviously, but sometimes you don't get that the ability to do that. So you gotta just go with what you have, and maybe it's not for the best that you try to save the friendships that you have. Yeah. Maybe it's time to just make change in your life and move on to something else.
Yeah,
because
maybe they're not suited for you.
Well, it's not even that. It's that maybe you were being a dick for years, and these people are just kind of having enough of it, and it's not worth trying to save that. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's 7 billion people on the planet. If you're living in Canada, there's 30 million people or whatever, right? And if you're living in the US, there's 300 million people. So you have the ability to go and meet new people.
Yeah.
My
your scope is so small.
Exactly, right? But my idea would be, put yourself in some weird group that makes you uncomfortable, right? Like a hiking group. If you don't like hiking, go fucking join a hiking group. You'll meet some interesting people, but just go at it with a positive mindset. Don't be a dick. And then go and try to make new friends. Yeah. Doing whatever the fuck it is that you might want to do.
Give yourself that opportunity.
Totally. If you go to the bar where there's a bunch of people that are drinking all the time because they're sad, depressed, and shitty, right? You're going to just find sad, depressed, and shitty people. And then that's going to continue to be you because you keep putting yourself in that scenario, right? But if you go out and you find people that are high on life, enjoying themselves, wanting to do better things, wanting to be happy, you're going to end up becoming that, right? But you have to be able to get out of your own fucking way first. That's number one. That is step number uno. Get out of your own fucking way and just go do something that is beneficial to you. Yeah. Do something that's fun. Do something that's going to get you out of your comfort zone and just meet people that are, and just do that and
interested as well.
Remove everything about your past. Yeah. Really. Just be a blank slate. Be like, hey, like you could even tell them, be like, I was going through some tough shit, but I've been wanting to change and I've been wanting to try something new. So I decided to come and do this. And people will totally appreciate that. Totally. Right? Because everybody's been through it. Right? Everybody has been through it. If you look back, I can guarantee you that most of the people out there, and there are a lot of people that keep their friends from school, but most people lose the majority of their friends from school. And then they end up having to find new friends. Right? So everybody can appreciate somebody fucking up and wanting to be better.
Yeah, everyone just fragments in a different direction, right?
Totally. And if they ask, "Oh, what did you do?" You don't have to answer that, right? You don't have to answer that question, right? If you were
I feel like people live in the hierarchy that they were in, which is either their home, their school, whatever, and they don't realize that they're outside the boundary of restrictions that other people created. right? And they still feel like they're restrained by these things or themselves in this fashion,
Right.
right? Where when you break the mold, that's when you give yourself the opportunity to be any possible facet of yourself. You unlock the potential because it's a choice, right? It's not this mystical thing. It's just a single choice that you're making to not be the same person, because you know there's things that you need to change, and you're going to be open to changing these things because it's the best course that I can take.
Right. Totally.
And when you believe that, well, then now you've given yourself the opportunity to make change.
Yeah. Totally.
Right? And however much in like a 360 that you release your your inhibitions, really, right? Like the person that you can be, right? If I always believe, oh, I'm dumb and I can't do math and I suck at this and I can't draw, well, these are self-created prophecies, right? They're going to take place because you've disabled the ability to make a plan about something because you given yourself the idea that whenever you do that thing, you're going to fail.
Yeah. And like we were talking about last time with placebo effect of telling other people that they are something, then you can build that into somebody else and make them believe exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Right? Just like with if everybody says that all of your friends that leave you say you're a grouchy old asshole.
Yeah.
You're going to believe you're a grouchy old asshole
Totally.
pretty fucking quick.
And then you're going to apply that as an identity to the things that you do.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you're going to give yourself your own perspective of the way that you do things when someone else just sees it as however you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like I could guarantee you, okay, all of the people in your life, if you are going, everyone that's left you call you a grouchy old asshole, and you go to the store, okay, and you walk around the store, none of the people at that store are going to think you're a grouchy old asshole. They're going to think you're a guy that's walking around the fucking store.
They don't have the context you've given yourself.
Exactly, right? So you need to take away that predisposed thing that is you, or that you think is you, and be like, okay, well, that's not me. Just because somebody said that's me doesn't mean that's me.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can be like, I am this. You could be like, I am whatever the fuck. I could be...
Well, let's clarify, this is not gender.
I wasn't talking about that.
I know. I just want to say it.
Okay. I am a... Fuck, you could just be like, I'm a golfer.
Sure.
Then you just go start playing golf, right? Now everybody's going to know you as a golfer because you're going to be going to the golf course and people are going to be seeing you play golf. So they're going to be like, oh, he's a golfer. Cool.
Sure.
Right? And now you just placeboed yourself into being a golfer because you told yourself you're a golfer and not a grouchy old asshole.
Yeah.
Now you've taken a left turn. You are now feeling way better. Oh, I'm a happy golfer.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not a grouchy old asshole now. Like, that's not even a thing on my radar anymore. I am now this because I've chosen this. I've placeboed my way into this. And now this is what I am. Great. Fuck yeah, you just made the best step you've probably made in your entire life.
Yeah, and this is where identity is a powerful tool, but it is the most dangerous thing that you can do. Because if you forget decisions that you've made and don't have the ability to change how you think from what you've decided because you've repressed those thoughts potentially, well, then you don't have the capabilities to unchange or to change those solidified ideologies, right? Because you've attached it to your identity,
right?
And it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and I don't really. I could see how that would work on a subconscious level, but
right. But then let's continue that thought, and then back to where you were talking about, which is you choosing, let's say, an occupation, and believing that I am that thing. Well, now you've given yourself a corrective. Where you may not even know the aspects within you that change when you become this type of person because you've decided to make these actions. Let's say it's climbing. Let's say I'm a climber. I want to do climbing and I'm going to try and learn this thing, or I want to draw. I'm
a hunter.
Maybe not even identify as anything. But just say I want to do something that I enjoy. Yeah. Right. And now you're not even attached to identity anymore. You're attached to maybe a value, which could be learning or curiosity or exploration, and you're giving yourself more open-minded, open setting where you're not restricted to a specific path. The path can fluctuate, but depending on your values, right, that you've decided, not about the way that the environment impacts you, right? Things that you have extracted and consolidated into wisdom, choosing your direction, right? And then maybe some things, some activities just automatically bounce off of that value that you have, just like it could be a poor value or a positive value, right? And that shifts the feeling of enjoyment that you get from certain things.
Right.
Right.
Totally.
But if you enable the enjoyment as well, like, well, maybe I could learn something from drawing or math or this, that, or the other thing that I've previously said I can't or won't or don't like to do. But maybe your perceptions have changed. You don't know. And when you ask yourself, maybe my perceptions have changed, who the fuck decides that? You do. Right? So if you've ever asked yourself questions that you don't think you have the power to change, well, it's just bringing it to your attention.
Right.
You do have the power to change them.
Absolutely.
Because it's up to you to believe it. But you're just not picking up a key because you can't see it.
Right.
And you're not putting it into the lock because you haven't seen the key.
Yeah.
Which is enabling yourself to change. But you have to do it based on a premise.
And that comes back to interrupting.
Which is vision.
And interrupting.
And
right?
interrupting.
You have to interrupt yourself and be able to say, is this the way that I really am and want to be? Is this, like, if you look, there's a point in your life that led up to now that you can probably see between when you were a child and when you had the thoughts in which you have now, right?
An inflection
and it's
point.
not even necessarily the thoughts you have now, right? There was a point that built your baseline of who you are, right? And then we had this point again when we understood or came across these books that we came across, like The Secret of the Golden Flower, all these cycles, right? So you can see chunks of your life through just looking back a little bit. I was a kid. And through this process of being like 0 to 6, I was experiencing all this crazy shit that I'd never seen before, right? And living life and just absorbing all this information. But then by the time I was 6 to 11, I had an idea of what these things are. Oh, it's a leaf. So I'm not curious about what this leaf is anymore. I'm not picking the leaf up off the ground and looking at it and crumbling it and doing all this stuff because it's a leaf, right? I'm no longer interested in that. I'm looking to find something else, right? So at that point, you now have a baseline of information. And then from 11 to this age, okay, well, now I'm experiencing girls.
Or you got punched
stuff,
in the face.
Or you're experiencing physical violence, and you're experiencing evil, rude people that are talking to you and saying like you're a piece of shit and you know, and giving you all these weird emotions. So now you're going through this emotional train while you're dealing with your hormones that are making you go through puberty, and now you're in your 20s, and now you can look back and you can see all these sections of your life where you could define change in yourself. Right? If you do that right now and look at where you are now, you can probably be like, well, why can't I do that now?
And the reason is because you're applying permanence to your state, because you can't see immediate future because you live in the moment. Right? You can't feel future when you live in the moment. I'm going to make that clear because you're limiting your top-down vision.
You're not restoring your principles.
No. You think the way that you feel is going to be how it is forever. In just like the way that we perceive time. Because if I am how I am right now, I am not something else. So I feel absolute in this state.
You are statued into this.
But that state shifts, right? It may shift high and low. It may be really low for a long time, maybe really high for a long time. It may vary, right? And maybe you're stuck in a rut where you believe this is how it is. But the only problem with believing this is how it is that mental thought process reciprocates itself and replicates, and then more of it occupies your mind, and just like that snowball, it starts to create itself, right? And it's one of those negative thought patterns that just occur, and you have to stop and interrupt it. But if you're not aware that it's occurring, that's when there's a problem. You believe the permanence of the moment,
right? And then at that point, when listening to a podcast like this one, I could understand how somebody would be able to find that thing. But the issue is when you're not looking for anything outside of what you are, right? You've cemented yourself as what you are so hard that you're not willing to you just have this reflective shield, right? Of
biases
of biases to information.
Yeah.
Right. So great example is
Blockages,
whenever you would
trauma.
give somebody the book of The Secret of the Golden Flower, and they'd be like, "That's ridiculous."
Sure.
Right. That is a ridiculous way to think of life because this is what I have.
Yeah.
Right.
They've already generated their beliefs and notions.
Exactly.
They're
right.
not open to it.
Exactly. And they're not interested in the idea of placebo. They're not interested in any of that stuff because they don't see it as something that is real.
Well, it's
Right.
because you can't see it in general. It's a ripple effect.
Totally. Yeah.
Unless you're watching the change that occurs.
Mhm.
But sometimes let's say I threw this book across the field that no one was in, but it's not going to see change until something interacts with it.
Or something
I
picks it up.
don't know.
Yeah.
I can't see it. I don't know the effects of my actions because I'm not always looking at everything that I've done and what they've done.
Yeah.
I'm not watching the cascade of events.
Yeah. Totally.
So you don't know even your own positive actions because you're not watching how yourself has changed.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you're not, and most people aren't even aware of the idea that you can change, right?
Well, yeah.
That's
Well, we
a
talked
big
about that.
piece. Yeah, and we did talk about that, but that's such an important factor is when you understand that there is a point in your life in which you can just be like, okay, well, obviously this isn't working for me. Something needs to change. Whether that be my mindset, whether that be the physical activity I do in a day, whether that be this, that, or the other thing, it doesn't matter, right? When you notice that you can make change, that is when everything will change. You'll realize, okay, I can actually apply happiness without having anything external affect that,
Yeah.
or be the cause of that, right? Most people get their pleasure out of, I won a car, or I won this raffle or something.
Yeah, they're
Yay!
excited by items and
Yeah,
and
but then
things.
how long until that thing goes away? Or how long until that feeling goes away?
Yeah, I was just about
2
to say.
days?
Oh,
A week?
It could be sooner.
Whatever.
But
yeah.
but you're trying to remind yourself of the thing by using the thing.
Yeah,
Which only
and-
makes you more attached to things.
But I think the thing is, people do the opposite, right? They do the complete opposite. They
Sure.
do exactly that, but to the negative, right?
Yeah, to the detrimental things.
Yeah. So with your example, I think that you've talked about in previous podcasts is with alcoholism, right?
Sure.
So people attach why they drink to a specific event in their life,
Yeah.
right? And then that event is the placebo effect of why they're going to start drinking more and more and more,
Yeah.
right? And now they've become an alcoholic, even if they don't think they're an alcoholic, right? They have become somebody that just drinks a lot. That is what they are,
Yeah.
and they know that to be true, and that to them that's fine,
Yeah.
right? And instead of at any point going, maybe this isn't very good for me.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something else that I can do to feel better about the thing that I'm worried about, or the trauma that I've been induced, or that somebody's induced upon me, right?
Yeah, or the low that you feel.
Exactly, right? And in regards to, this is kind of another jump to a weird different place, but in regards to veterans, right? I'm surprised there isn't any training or any piece that teaches them the importance of the way that they think. Right? I understand that trauma is huge in veterans,
Yeah.
right? Because they go to war, they see their friends die, they can get their leg blown off. There's a
Yeah.
lot of these things, right? And with that, it's just hard to see past it. You probably have nightmares about, I would imagine these people have nightmares about this thing every night, and some people, right? And it's really hard when that is constantly being thrown in your face to be able to step away from it.
Yeah,
Put
there's
it
lots of
aside.
distracting things.
Exactly. And put it aside. And so they start to drink to forget, right? Instead of going, okay, this is an experience that I've gone through that has the ability to make me stronger in some way, right? And finding those things that you can grow from that to
Totally.
further yourself in life. Or maybe, because who knows, maybe some veteran, I imagine some veterans have gone through this. They've healed mentally. They've thought of a way that they could maybe help other veterans get through this, and then starting up help groups and stuff like that. And that's a great thing, right? But there's so many of them out there that don't have that as an option. They just out on the streets. They're not making any money. They're just they've
stricken.
They've thrown their lives to the country, and the country is not giving shit back.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a very much, you feel small. And that's a very, these people probably feel attacked by their own people and thrown to this dirt for something that they have no control over because they try to do good for their people, right?
Yeah.
And now they're just a pile of shit to all of these other people. They're, people will walk by homeless people on the road not knowing anything about their past and saying, why don't you get a fucking job instead of asking me for money, right? Like, how brutal is that? Can you imagine being a person who was literally fighting in Iraq or something and then coming home to your own people who you fought for to be told that?
Yeah, you'd feel really diminished.
Why do you think homeless people or veterans go on a fucking rampage sometimes? They just go on a fucking murder rampage. Well, fuck you guys. I was over there fighting for you guys while you were over here fucking sleeping and doing whatever the fuck you want on watching TV. And now I come back and I get treated like garbage. Fuck you. I'm going to shoot you people. And that's why a lot of these people go on rampages.
But think about why someone would act that way, right? Because they have some connotation to the thing that the person's doing, which would be war, for example.
Yeah.
Right? And that has a lot of, it's a very complex thing. Right? Where someone can have opinions about this thing that they take out on the person doing the thing. It's like getting mad at the cashier. They're just trying to sell you the burger. Yeah. Right? Like, they don't give a shit, dude. They're not the burger. Yeah. Right? They didn't make the burger. They're not McDonald's. No. They're just a cashier. Yeah. They're just the person. When people take out their anger on people who are just there because they're angry. Yeah. Right? That's a problem.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally. And I find that hilarious. I find it hilarious that people get really up in arms with people and less up in arms when something like technology breaks down.
Sure.
It's hilarious to me because technology is meant to do the thing that it's meant to do. Whereas human beings are people with emotions and flaws and make mistakes, but everyone sees humans as what needs to be perfect, but then lets the technology slide when it fucks up.
What do you mean technology slide?
Okay. As an example, the pop machine broke. Okay. So they're still popping it. The people did their job filling it properly, right? But then the pop machine breaks, and now the person's like, fuck, I can't get my Coca-Cola. And they go over to the person at the front counter and it's like, you fuckers didn't fix your machine and blah, 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 right? But so they don't get mad at the machine, they get mad at the people. Yeah. Because the people are the people that can get a response. They want some sort of this reactionary response that's going to...
They want someone to hear them.
It's going to validate what they're upset about, right? They want that validation from every experience, whether that be a negative or a good, positive experience. So they're going to freak out over something. They can't freak out at the robot. Let's freak out at the people.
The robot doesn't give a shit.
The robot don't give them fucks.
Then it comes down to this fundamental precept of why people want to do something to others, which is to get a reaction.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Whenever that reaction fulfills in the emptiness that they're trying to fill.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But a lot of it comes from them needing something that they didn't get, and they don't know how to salvage where they are. Right. Yeah. Right. And that is like the eternal journey, because there's so many different keys that need to go in so many different problems. Yeah. And if you're never looking for the keys, you're always just collecting more problems.
Totally.
Right. And that's how I look at it. Right. Because I can look in my past, like if I was just doing it like an activity kind of thing, and just review myself. That's me looking at problems like locks, and then trying to think of keys to that lock. Right. I'm observing the situation objectively, aka like a bird's eye view, and I see the situation. Right. I'm obviously implicated in the situation, but I can see the surroundings. I can see the thing that I'm in. Right. Which gives me the opportunity to shift that. Totally. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of that path.
Totally. Yeah. And it's just, it's powerful when you can make that path your existence.
Yeah. Right? You want paying back the debt.
Exactly.
But it's your own debt, right? It's like your own trauma that happens to you, right? It accumulates, right? The things that you don't resolve when it happens. Yeah. Right. Totally. And that's where you have like the mood that turns into the temperament, that turns into the et cetera, personality trait eventually, right? Like it concretes in you because these problems have never been resolved.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you know that there's a problem that you need fixing, it's best not to push it off. Just attack it. Be like, fuck, I'm solving this problem. I'm not
Yeah.
dealing with this shit anymore. I don't want to fucking put it, like, because on top of all your own problems that you've dealt with, you have other people's problems that
Yeah.
you're also having to deal with, which is
Yeah.
whether that be your families, whether that be your partners, whether that be your, if you have kids, your kids' problems, right? Your kid comes home and be like, oh, Billy bullied me. And it's just like, oh, well, fuck, now I got to deal with that shit. Well, no, like, you got to,
Yeah.
at that point.
But in the moment, that was detrimental to their mind. They
Absolutely.
were so impacted by that.
Yeah, and you
Absolutely.
should, I'm not saying fuck Billy.
No, but that's just, like, it's just clarifying the point, though.
Yeah,
right? Because that was
totally.
that's a trauma. That was something that occurred.
Yeah.
That next time something similar to that situation happens, you're going to have that memory and that feeling, that sensation hit you in the moment again.
Totally.
It's going to resurrect
Yeah,
you
so here's a
when it
really
comes.
interesting example, and this is a, like, let's actually stick to Billy and bullying.
Sure.
Right? So your son comes home and says Billy has been bullying me. And let's say as a kid you were bullied and you never dealt with that trauma, right?
Sure.
But now you're a big adult and your child who is 6 years old just came home and said another 6-year-old just bullied me. Now you want to go fuck that kid up. You're like,
Yeah.
fuck that kid. I'm going to show
How
that kid what's
dare.
up, because you haven't dealt with your own problems.
Yeah.
You haven't dealt with your own traumas. So you go to that kid's parents and you're like, your kid was bullying my
You
kid,
lash
blah, blah,
out.
freaking the fuck out for no reason, really, like over a little scrap. Kids are going to scrap. This is a normal thing,
It's
right?
inevitable.
It's absolutely inevitable. You can't escape it. The kids are monsters. It's just how it
They're
is.
going to explore.
Exactly.
Whether
right?
it comes with a fist to the face,
Right.
who knows?
Exactly. Right. But when I've heard stories of parents getting into fist fights over their kids having a spat. It's just ridiculous because
How dare you let your Billy hit my Jimmy?
Exactly. Not to have a
That's
sexual
fucking
connotation
hilarious.
there. Billy and Jimmy don't touch, but
Yeah, no, like more of like a,
yeah,
like a combat.
It was a joke, but you really have to
That's fucking
take a
funny.
step away from just life for a minute.
Sure.
Look at what you've experienced and been like, okay, what are the things that has built this weird wall that stops me from doing a certain thing?
Yeah.
And then tackle it. Just get on it right away. I don't care if you need to go to therapy or whatever. You can probably deal with it yourself if you put enough time into it,
Yeah.
but you just really need to find that thing. If it is bullying, if you dealt with bullying in the past, you can't let that be something that is affecting you now. So
Totally.
you need to solve it. You need to solve the puzzle.
Yeah.
You need to be like, okay, maybe your approach can be in the middle of a big piece of paper. You write down what the problem is. I got bullied, right? And then you circle it. And then you just make this big diagram of all the things that encompass why that fucked you up and made you the way that you are now and the way that you don't want to be.
Yeah,
right?
simply.
Just so that
In
you
a
can
simple way.
see it in front of you, right? And I do this a lot with things that I need to solve, right? You just put it in front of you so you can read it, so you can see it, so you can be like, okay, why is this actually affecting me? Like, why am I affected by this? Why shouldn't I be affected by this? Okay, maybe the why I shouldn'ts are outweighing the why I am affected, right? Maybe there's only 4 or 5 things about that that's affecting me, but it's like this trauma that's so ingrained emotionally in me that maybe just seeing these why I shouldn'ts is the thing that can stop you from worrying about it, and is the thing that shows you the key that you need to pick up to unlock the box,
Yeah.
so that you can put that thing in the box and lock that shit back up,
Yeah.
right?
And you have to find the keys in the memories.
Exactly.
Right? And as you find keys to problems, some keys fit in other problems.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where you explore that.
Totally. Your brain
And it becomes easier over time.
Your brain is the master key to everything.
Yeah.
But sometimes that master key doesn't quite jive, and you got to jiggle it a little bit, and you got to find some shit that makes that thing unlock. Right? Your brain has the power to do anything within your body and mind. Right? And for you and my perspective, the conscious observer has the ability to affect what the brain thinks about a certain thing.
Totally.
So for
Pull the
years,
string, so to speak.
for years, I thought of myself as an anxiety-strucken fuck that just was totally unable to be fit in the world, right? And I was just self-judging myself all the time, right? But then I came to the conclusion through just the literature that we were reading and doing some thought journaling, like you have, not to the extent that you have, but I kind of wish I am at that level, but now I'm going to start doing it. Is that anxiety isn't really, for me personally anymore, a real thing. It is real. Everybody experiences
Sensation.
it, right? But it's just something that washes over you. When you think about stage fright and being scared of going up onto the stage, in middle school, I was terrified of going up onto stage, but I would push myself and go into theater class so that I would have to go up on stage and deal with it. And I would always be like, oh fuck, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Especially when I had to go up on stage in a red dress. That was fucking awesome. But I was super anxious. I was like
keep going.
Yeah, I was super anxious, and I was like, fuck, this sucks. And then I got out there, I started the act, I started the thing, and it all just goes away. And then you're like, anxiety is just a fucking construct. This is something that I'm building in my head that is literally building a brick and mortar wall that's stopping me from going through this thing. You just have to step over that fucking wall before it gets too high.
Yeah.
Right?
And the way that I interpreted, like, visually was, you said step, and I was like, okay, well, what was the thing that you were doing? Like, the first imprint of it, like the first step, the first 5% was the feeling that you got from your experience. Yeah. And then everything after that was your interpretation of that first step.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. But the other thing is that, the first step, that's all you need. You just got to get over the wall.
Yeah, but did you get occupied by the first step? Did you let that first thought maintain your mind space?
Exactly.
Or did you change it and be like, okay, I'm going to think about the things that I'm actually doing.
Yeah.
And then rather than my self-anxiety that I just keep perpetuating because I let it linger in my thought space.
Yeah, and it really did help me just remembering that everybody in this class had put in months and months of work to do this, to be involved in this, right?
To break your pattern.
Well, and that was
comfortable and
totally.
Skills
and there was other people that were relying on me to do good in my part so that their part was good too, right? So
symbiotic in that way.
Exactly. So I had to do it. I couldn't back out and be like, no, I don't want to do this. Even though the fucking gymnasium was filled with 400 people, I was like, ugh. But then, you know what? I looked around, I saw my group, everybody had done a great job.
Yeah.
And I needed to keep going. I needed to do the thing. And that's kind of a thing that I think community breaks anxiety, right? When you put yourself in that space and be like, okay,
you share the burden.
Exactly. You're sharing the burden. It's not all on you.
Yeah, but you see someone in the crowd and they're not acting in a way that you feel self-conscious about. And that's the sharing the burden. They're not anxious about your anxiety.
Yeah.
They want you to do well.
Exactly.
So when you see them with that expression and that kind of energy that they're giving off, you feel like, oh, maybe I can do this.
Yeah.
Right? And then your first step shifts and you've changed your perception on what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're more excited because the other thing is anxiety and excitement share very, very similar sensations because they arise very similar cocktails of chemicals in your brain. Because it's up to you to decide which side of the line it's sitting on. Am I anxious about this thing because, oh, what is this? But it's I can feel the excitement of it, but am I interpreting it as I'm scared about it? Or am I going to use this energy and ride it and make that excitement into enjoyment?
Yeah. Totally.
Right? And it's separate tracks, but same origin point.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, totally. And I think when you think about it in the regard of origin point, okay, what is the origin point, or not the origin point, but the end
trigger,
the end point?
Oh,
sorry, what's the end point of what is going to happen after you've done the thing that you're anxious about?
You will feel content.
Sure.
You've completed something that you didn't think you could.
Great. So you've done that. Now go farther. 10 years in the future.
Yeah.
Right?
You're no longer hindered by this obstacle that you didn't overcome.
Exactly.
Because you overcame it.
Right? But if you didn't overcome that, maybe that becomes a part of your psyche. That becomes a part of you because you're like, I have stage fright. I've had stage fright for all this time since I fucked up back in middle school and didn't go up on that stage. I've been terrified. I've never gone up on a stage. Right? Well, now you've just identified yourself as having stage fright. Yeah. And you've decided I am unfit. I am unfit to do this specific thing.
Yeah.
Right? But if you just did it when you were a kid, because in 10 years nobody's gonna give a fuck. Nobody's gonna remember. Nobody's gonna know. Oh, this was the kid that went up on the stage. And by the way, the red dress thing that I had to do. I'm gonna just preface this a little bit, or I guess post-face this a little bit. I had two parts in a play, and it was the three little pigs were suing the wolf for destroying their houses. That was the whole thing. And then and I had two separate parts. I was the wolf's people, like I was on the side of the wolf to start off, and I think I did like an Eminem song or some shit, and we had to like sing, and it was great. But then
Awesome.
because the person who was supposed to do Little Red backed out,
Yeah.
somebody else had to do it. And I was like, well, we're technically all just side characters here. So what if they get pissed off and get up and just leave, and then we come back out as different people, and then we come back out as Little Red in the Hood, and yeah, so that was really fun, right? But it made it really easy because everyone was relying on this other character to come out, and then Grandma to come out, and all that. It was honestly a great time. But
Yeah, but the acceptance of being on stage and seeing people look at you and having that experience and that sensation at first is scary, right?
oh, totally,
Yeah, but the thing is that is your first perception of it,
yeah,
right? You have to overcome that perception. Be like, okay, what is this? That's this feeling that feels like it's locking me down, right? And then after feeling it and analyzing, you be like, oh, maybe I am scared, and it's okay, but I'm still gonna do it because I need to. And then that's when you transition to thinking about the thing.
Totally.
Right? That can happen in a split second, right? Or it can capture you, and you can lock in place and stutter and stammer, and you're in some kind of autopilot. You may have just turned off, right? But that's because you've snowballed, right? You've been captured by the idea that is detrimental.
Right. Totally. And that's, and so anyways, in regards to what I was doing, right, to me in my head at that time at such a young age was thinking I just wanted to make people laugh.
Yeah.
Right. Which was pretty damn easy. I was going up on a stage as a chubby kid in a red dress. I literally ripped one of my classmates' mom's dresses that she brought in so I could wear it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fucking hilarious. I feel sorry, Sarah. Sorry about your mom's dress, but it was quite funny. But yeah, that experience for me was a great experience because I went up, everybody laughed. I didn't feel embarrassed. I was playing a part, right? Yeah. Everybody laughed, had included. A great time. It was fantastic. And from there, I understood that really, I bet you if I went back and asked any of the people that were in that crowd if they remember what part I played in that play, they'd be like, fuck no, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe they would remember you were Little Red in the Hood, but you were also these other people that I don't exactly remember because that part may not have been as funny for them, right? But I specifically remember thinking in my head, this is going to be funny. And that's great. I like making people laugh, right? So that was what stopped that anxiety.
Yeah, you've given yourself a direction where you've accepted a result.
Like, why do I have to be anxious here? If my goal is to make people laugh, this is a fucking great way of doing it.
So thinking about making people laugh makes you generate thoughts to make people laugh.
Totally.
Rather than anxiety thoughts.
Exactly.
Right? So just thinking on the track, right, of having comedy. Like, let's say it was like a comedy show or something.
Sure.
Where you're trying to make jokes and you're trying to think of funny things, but maybe to you, the funny things that you just said aren't that funny. So you have to probe. You have to navigate the waters of trying to tell jokes, and maybe something sticks. Maybe you get an unexpected reaction. Right? Well, that's where you got to hunker down because that's where the audience is at.
Yeah.
Right? It may change in location, right? But trying to change your thoughts is that exploration. You have to keep trying to make a new plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Totally. That's integral, right? If you never if you're never consciously thinking about what the next step is, right, in whatever it is that you're doing, whether that be comedy, whether that be acting, whether that be playing a sport, whatever it is, right, then you're never growing. You're not going to grow. You're just going to stay stagnant and be where you are, right? If you're never pushing the boundary, you're never moving forward. If you're never pushing, like, that's the thing. If you're stuck behind this barrier and you don't push on it and you don't push on the thing, it's never going to move. It's not going to move easily. Just like with the snowball rolling up the hill thing. Yeah. Right? Same deal here. You're pushing on this boundary.
There's resistance.
It's going to be tough, but once you get the thing up and moving, it's going to start being easier and easier and easier until the thing feels like it's a fucking balloon.
Yeah, and
right?
that's where there's strategies to it, right? Where the greater the obstacle, the greater the gain, the benefit that you can have.
Yeah, totally.
Hopefully and theoretically, right? Whereas if you have a traumatizing thing, the more you get, like if you get over that, there's a true belief about the outcome that you've placed on it, right? Because you know that I don't feel this way, I feel this way now.
Right.
There's an absolute to it. But when you make small gains, you get small wins. But it's not like you're losing, you're getting little wins.
Right.
So when you can set up something that you can do and will do is better than doing something that you should do. Until, like at the very beginning, until you can generate a little bit of momentum and target all of the things that you need to do, because you've given yourself a tiny little snowball to start. Right, which is like the concept of cleaning your room and making your space tidy, so you are able to do the things that you want to do because you're no longer looking at all the shit that you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. Fuck yeah.
But that's a perfect way to end it.
Yeah.
Thank you for sticking around if you made it to this point, and have an awesome day. You
guys have a great day, and we're gonna really try to hammer out weekly content for you guys. So please join the Discord. We'll put it in the description of the podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and maybe come have a chat with us. Maybe we can get some cool opinions and things to talk about. Thanks, guys.
Take care.